This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And make sure to order Jamie Glazov's new critically acclaimed jihadist psychopath, how he is charming, seducing, and devouring us. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, Cuomo de Blasio go after Jewish weddings. With us this evening, backed by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the editor and the writer of the blog The Point at Front Page Magazine. Daniel, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
You had a very fascinating and profound article at Front Page Magazine recently titled Cuomo de Blasio Go After Jewish Weddings, Cheer Black Lives Matter Riots. So Daniel, it's very important in New York City and in New York to stop Jewish weddings because they're just not safe. But when it comes to Black Lives Matter riots, even if there's thousands of people with no masks very close together, it seems that's okay for Andrew Cuomo and de Blasio, right?
Yeah, we've seen this in California. We've seen this in New York. They're obsessively going after people of faith, specifically Judeo-Christians. So anytime a church has a service, right away they start talking about the dangers of community spread. In New York, you have a Hasidic wedding, you have a Hasidic funeral, and that is a subset of Orthodox Jews, I should mention. Right away, there are claims that this is absolutely going to spread the virus. You know, you can actually see photos and videos of some of those same politicians, including Bill de Blasio, including Governor Cuomo, shoulder to shoulder, wearing no masks with guys like Al Sharpton, with assorted Black Lives Matter people, and no mask wearing, no worries about spread, no worries about these people are going to infect everybody. So there's this profound and deep double standard. When you have left-wing activism, then the virus somehow does not spread. When you have anything that's not left-wing activism, in particular any kind of religious service, any religious event that's not taking place in the mosque, then right away, red alert.
Absolutely. And we obviously understand that this is the left, and we know that there's a war on the Judeo-Christian tradition. So there are more sinister and malicious agendas in the background, and we will discuss some of that as we go forward. But let's just continue to discuss this situation at hand first and how malicious and absurd and surreal it is. Let's take a back step for a minute just to clarify and crystallize how evil this force is that we're dealing with. Daniel, as you point out in your article, Governor Andrew Cuomo actually forced corona patients into nursing homes, killing some 6,000 to 11,000 senior citizens. I mean, this is murder on a very high degree. Just remind our viewers of what this guy actually did in this context.
This is absolutely horrifying. Governor Cuomo ordered nursing homes, whether they wanted to or not, to accept patients infected with the coronavirus. No testing was even allowed to determine if they were or were not infected. And this is, the same atmosphere where everybody has to get tested all the time. And by the way, Cuomo was not alone in doing this. A number of other governors, Democrat governors, have done this. Whitmer in Michigan, Newsom in California, Murphy in New Jersey, and really combined, Murphy, New Jersey, and Cuomo, New York, are responsible for a sizable chunk of the country's nursing home death toll. They've stonewalled, they've played games, they've insisted that it absolutely had nothing to do with that. But the bottom line is they killed huge numbers of people. There's been virtually no discussion about what was in their heads when they did it. If you have the same Time magazine rolling out the splashy 200,000 dead cover and blaming it on President Trump, yet at the same time, Cuomo was invited to speak at the DNC convention to celebrate how great New York did at the virus, which involved, again, killing between 6,000 and 11,000 nursing home patients.
Right, and so Cuomo killed some 10,000 senior citizens in these nursing homes by putting corona patients in there, and or people infected with corona. But Jewish weddings are the big problem. Daniel, may I ask, how many people usually attend a Jewish wedding, just on average?
The figures can vary. Hasidic weddings tend to be somewhat larger. They were claiming that there were, so the ban is on gatherings of larger than 50. So if they had 100 people at that wedding, regardless of the space, then no doubt they treated this as the major crisis and as the major threat. Meanwhile, you have Black Lives Matter rallies that have thousands of people. And you have Sharpton's recent rally, by the way, that had 50,000 people.
Yeah, obviously something is not adding up here. But when the left is involved, it all adds up very much. Now, I don't want to speak for you, Daniel. Just in my own perspective, I don't see this as mistakes. I don't see this as just naive good intentions that lead to problems. I see malice here, and this is all very intentional. And we'll let you speak on this as we continue here. Let's transfer over at the same time now to, while Jewish weddings are very dangerous, Christians meeting in church is also just very dangerous. But now we've also got these MTV awards, and if Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande or Miley Cyrus want to gyrate on stage and there's people around, that's okay too, right?
Of course, they're considered essential workers. Celebrities who come in to participate in a video awards in New York are considered essential workers. Before you laugh too hard, why was the media allowed to operate all this time? Why was CNN allowed to operate? Because they've been deemed essential. It's funny, you have people who actually are earning a living or providing vital services. They are not deemed essential. But CNN was deemed essential. Every media operation in the country was deemed essential because it's essential for the Democrat politicians to get positive coverage, and it's essential for them to hang out with celebrities and have the MTV Video Music Awards. They've got their priorities, and those priorities show their values. You mentioned hostility to Christianity, to Judaism, to faith. Those show their values. This also shows their values. This is where their hearts, their minds, what's left of their souls are located.
Oh boy, the life that, well, I don't know if I want to call it the life, but the situation that Marxism produces, just so much morbid, just deranged circumstances, if that's just one description. In your article, Daniel, you also write about, let's talk about here for a minute, the enforcement here. So we've got New York City's government, which you point out, they just can't seem to do anything about stores being destroyed. Okay, so police are not dispatched out, or authorities are not dispatched out to stop looting. But in terms of, sending out proactive inspections of weddings, I mean, there's all kinds of authorities going to those. Can you just describe the situation here? So there's a bride and a groom saying their vows, and just police are just, forcing their way in through the windows and the back door. But when it comes to the demonstrations, no police are to be seen. Is that close to being accurate?
Exactly. You have New York City specifically telling its so-called contract tracers not to ask people about attending Black Lives Matter rallies. Now, the same whole tracing and disease detectives are being sick on these religious Jewish weddings because, of course, that somehow spreads the virus. If you go to a Black Lives Matter rally, somehow the virus does not pass from one leftist to another. Antifa and BLM have no ability to infect each other. They have some magical social justice immunity. But if you go to a religious wedding, recently there was a big piece in the San Francisco Chronicle about a wedding that took place in a cathedral, and they tried to claim that all these people spread the virus around the country. If you go to a Hasidic Jewish wedding in New York, somehow they spread the virus. So magically, if you're on the left and the virus has no effect on you, you have spiritual immunity to this virus. But of course, if you're a religious person, then you're very naturally vulnerable to the virus. Now, this makes perfect sense if you think of these people as pagans who believe that their beliefs have the power to repel disease.
Yeah. Daniel, in your article, you also touch on this. So part of the prosecution, the crackdown and all this, it also involves informants, rats, snitches, like we saw in the communist, Soviet Union and Mao's China or in Castro's Cuba. So in this particular case, we know that we have Cuomo and de Blasio, who also have their informants on Jewish weddings, Christian weddings, etc. So I'm trying to picture this. So they kind of send in this kind of informant. I guess he's trying to pretend he's a Hasidic Jew, maybe with attire. And he's like, so anybody planning on getting married lately? And just trying to figure out. But they're not sending in informants to find out if any New Yorkers are going to Al Sharpton's rally in Washington, D.C., where there were thousands and thousands of attendees. Tell us about how this informant stuff is working and the hypocrisy there.
Now, early on, even within the so-called pandemic, you had states, cities, localities deploying a whole bunch of tools for actually soliciting tips. The Bill de Blasio actually put up a whole dedicated phone line. There are places that have actually had special apps in which you can take a picture and inform on people. Bill de Blasio also encouraged people, you're at the supermarket, you see too many people, take a photo, send it to us. And on the one hand, it's bizarre and absurd. On the other hand, suddenly Americans are living like this is East Germany all of a sudden. It's inform on your neighbor. The person who informs the most gets Yankees tickets. This is the insane world we're living in.
Yeah, I can kind of see it right now. There's just like 10,000 people at this rally just destroying this entire city. And there's guys on the phone looking through a window going, yeah, there's this guy and this woman getting married right now. They're about to exchange their vows. And the police are just, driving in to stop that wedding. Daniel, now, de Blasio announced this Racial Justice and Reconciliation Commission to tackle systematic racism. But his administration, as you're documenting and pointing out, is actually involved in systematic discrimination, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and of course, hatred of Christians, right?
Absolutely. This is an administration that has been vocal, openly using derogatory and threatening language. Back in the day, there was a Hasidic funeral, and Bill de Blasio specifically tweeted a warning to the Jewish community that this will no longer be tolerated, and this was followed by a ticket blitz, which witnesses said was very much aimed at people who looked like religious Orthodox Jews. If this were being done to Black people, we'd be having a national dialogue for about 3 months about this. We'd have a DOJ investigation. There was a bit of a DOJ letter in response to this from the Department of Justice, but there was no major action taken about this. And this is in some ways unprecedented, because if you think about any politician, any mayor, any governor actually singling out a particular religious or ethnic group and saying, I'm sending you a warning not to do this anymore, this would be absolutely tremendously shocking. And yet this happened. There was a bit of comment on it, and we all moved on, which is what happens when the left and the Democrats in general blatantly violate norms. They blatantly violate the law. They violate political and legal norms, and they get a pass on it.
Daniel, look, let me speak for myself for a minute, my religious perspective, and then I'd ask you to discuss your religious perspective on this, because, I believe that there's spiritual forces involved here. So we've definitely got the left, which I see is evil. And how can I say this very quickly? Let us make man in our own image, okay, during creation. And so when we see each other and humans recognize each other, we don't recognize each other necessarily by the elbow or the knee. It's our faces. And God's creation is there. We see God's creation in each other when we see each other. So to me as a Christian, there's no confusion as to what entity wants to disguise God's creation in each other. And so I see the mask ultimately as a very evil thing. And wherever 2 or 3 people are gathered in my name, I am there with them. So as a Christian, and us Christians believe that, yes, we pray to Christ, even on our own, and He hears us. But when we're together, that's also something very, very special, and Christ is there with us. To me, there's no confusion as to why the left and the entity behind the left wants to stop people from going into churches and synagogues, etc. And some people will scoff right now and see me as some kind of lunatic or whatever, but that's how I view things. As a Jewish person with your faith, how do you see this spiritually?
Well, you have to ask who benefits from pitting people against each other, from making people afraid, from not just dividing, breaking up communities, but turning parents and children against each other, turning family members against each other, making it impossible for people to worship as a community, because religion is a communal matter. We connect with other people. When we're not physically there, when we're not connecting with other people, then the community has been broken up, and you have to ask what replaces it. We've seen what replaces it. Zoom sessions, we've seen people trying to remotely connect to each other, mediated through big tech, through assorted political rallies, and people get frustrated, they get depressed, they get angry. Part of the violence, part of the anger, part of the frustration that we're seeing in this country is very much the case. You put on a mask, you go out, you can't actually smile at another person can't smile at you. You are taught to fear the other person, you're taught to fear yourself. All this is fundamentally twisted, it's perverse, and it's teaching and it's destroying the fundamental building blocks of a community. And without that, you have no religious values, you have no meaningful moral values at all. And part of the anger we're seeing, the racial division in this country, the level of animosity is very much because people are no longer able to connect as a community. They can't, as you put it, see each other's faces. They can only see threats. They can see enemies on all sides of them. And they're even taught to think of themselves as the enemy within. This is very much what has been created. Now, religion is very much based around a community. We worship God as a community. We come together to worship God. An individual worshiping God is nice. It has personal enrichment value, but it doesn't fundamentally change the world. The community worshiping God, however, fundamentally changes the world. And this is really what they're very much afraid of, because the left has created its own religion. It's not an atheistic movement. It is a movement that believes that has all the values of religion except for God. Their idea of God is government. Their idea is that God is incarnate within the power of people to rule over other people. And this is what we're seeing now with these lockdowns, with this entire culture of oppression, of totalitarian exercises of power for the sake of power, of this entire culture of keeping people afraid all the time. What we're seeing is the worship of the God of government. We're seeing the rise of a new religion. And that religion is quite horrifying. It is a religion that teaches us that we should not be a community, that we should hate each other, that we should fear each other, and that our only hope is actually for salvation is through the government.
And you have just summarized what the left is all about. And to quickly conclude, thank you, Daniel. That was brilliant, succinct, very profound. And our conclusion is that the Democratic Party is a Christian Jew-hating party, correct?
It is. Once they actually signed up with the radical left, which seeks to destroy and replace Judaism and Christianity, they fundamentally have to hate Christians and Jews. They have to destroy them. When they can, they usurp them, they hijack them, they create leftist churches and synagogues that actually worship what they believe rather than God. But when anybody actually does worship God, when anybody is sincere about their religion, they have to be destroyed because they're being replaced.
Brilliant stuff, and also scary stuff when the left continues to gain so much power. Daniel Greenfield, thank you for gracing the Glazov Gang with your presence and with your wisdom.
Thank you for continuing to do this hard work, Jamie. I very much appreciate it, and I know your viewers and listeners appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Hope to see you again soon. Viewers of the Glazov Gang, you need to be reading Daniel Greenfield's blog, The Point, at frontpagemag.com. Every 10 minutes, press refresh, see if he's got a new blog up. And we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.